Section 101 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michele Eaton. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Little Half Chick, a Spanish folk tale. Once upon a time there was a hen who made a nest for herself in one corner of a sunny farmyard in Spain. The nest was close against the whitewashed wall of the house and was snug and well sheltered. There Mother Hen raised a brood of small chicks. Fluffy and yellow and beautiful did they come from the shell. Very good little chicks they were too, all but one, and that one, oh dear me, when his mother called to him, cluck, 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 he never did what she told him. When she bade him come here, he went there. When she bade him do this, he did that. He always gobbled the choicest morsels of food in the yard, and he wanted his own way in all things. One day when the whole family was scratching about in the dust, Mother Hen noticed suddenly this little chick had only half a head, and half a body, and half a tail, and one eye, and one wing, and one leg. Dear me, what in the world is the matter with my chick? Clucked Mother Hen in dismay. How did he ever come to be such a queer little fellow? But very soon it became quite plain enough to good Mother Hen why this chick was but a half chick. No matter how hard she tried to teach him to do what was right, he only tossed his little half head and flipped his little half tail and did exactly as he chose. Dear me, said Mother Hen sadly. One day little half chick came hopping up to his mother on his one little leg, stump, 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 and he said, "Goodbye, Mother. I'm off to the city to see the king." "Off to the city?" cried poor Mother Hen. "Why, you haven't even learned yet how to behave in a poultry yard. You'll never get on in the city. Stay here and learn from me, and who knows, you may still grow into a whole chick." But little half chick tossed his little half head and flipped his little half tail and cried, "I know enough without any teaching. This life here is too quiet for me. I'm off to the king." And away he went with a hop and a skip. Stump, 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 stump. Over hill, over dale, past wheat field and barley field, past olive grove and vineyard, past flocks of woolly merino sheep with shepherds in sheepskins and gay-coloured blankets. On hopped little half chick, stump, 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 up the highway. At length, when he had got some distance on his journey, he reached a lonely place where he came upon a little stream. The stream was choked up with weeds that held it there a prisoner, so it could not go leaping on its way. "Oh, little half chick, murmured the water. "The weeds have bound me fast with their chains. Please stop and pull them away and set me free to go on my journey." But little half chick only tossed his little half head and flipped his little half tail. "Stop and set you free?" he cried. "Well, I should think not. I haven't the time to bother with you. I'm off to the city to see the king." And for all the brooklet's beseeching, he went on his way. Stump, stump, stump. A little farther along, what should half chick come upon but a fire, whose flames were sinking lower and lower, so that little more of it was left than a mass of glowing red embers. "Sticks, give me sticks," faintly sputtered the fire. "Oh, little half chick, feed me with sticks, or I shall go out altogether." "Feed you with sticks?" cried little half chick. "Well, I should think not. I haven't the time to bother with you. I'm off to the city to see the king." And he tossed his little half head and flipped his little half tail and went on his way. Stump, stump, stump. Pretty soon half chick passed through a thick wood, and there he found the wind caught tight in a clump of bushes. "Oh, little half chick, faintly whispered the wind, "pray stop and pull these bushes apart and make a loophole for me to get out." "Stop and pull those bushes apart?" cried little half chick. "Well, I should think not. I've no time to bother with you. I'm off to the city to see the king." And he tossed his little half head and flipped his little half tail and went on his way. Stump, stump, stump. After a while the road became crowded with people, some riding mules with red leather harnesses, some on horseback, some driving wagons, and some on foot. Ahead of him he saw the great wall of the city, with steeples and towers and gay-coloured roofs peeping over it. In the midst of the crowd he slipped through the city gate, up the narrow crooked little streets, with tight-packed houses on either side, through the marketplace where gaily dressed men and women danced to the click of the castanets, till he came to the palace of the king. There he stumped by a guard at the gate and into the palace yard. But it happened the gate by which he had entered was a back gate, so instead of being at the grand entrance to the palace, he found himself in the kitchen yard. Just as he was crossing the court, the king's cook looked out of the window and spied him. "Just the thing for the king's dinner," he cried. "I was needing a chicken for the king's soup." And he reached out the window, seized little Half-Chick, ran with him to the fire, took the cover off a great pot, threw in a handful of onions, garlic, tomatoes and Spanish peppers, and after them all popped in little Half-Chick. Then he clapped down the cover. Bang! It was dark enough inside the kettle. The water rolled over little Half-Chick and twirled him round and round. "Oh, water, water," he cried, "do not roll over me and twirl me round. Help me, help me." "Ah, little Half-Chick," bubbled the water, "when I was in need you would not stop to help me. What right have you to ask me to stop and help you now?" And he went about his business of rolling and twirling about in the pot. Soon the water began to grow warm, very warm. "Fire, fire, do not cook me," cried little Half-Chick. But the fire leapt up in strong, bright flames. "When I was in need you would not stop to help me," he crackled. "What right have you to ask me to stop and help you now?" And he went on about his business of making the water hotter. Pretty soon the cook took the cover off the pot to see how his soup was doing. As he stood there sniffing the onions and garlic and tomatoes and Spanish peppers, along came the wind. "Oh, wind, wind, help me," cried little Half-Chick. "Get me out of this pot." "Ah, little Half-Chick," whistled the wind, "when I was in need you would not stop to help me. What right have you to ask me to stop and help you now?" But just as the cook was about to clap down the cover on the kettle, the wind did take little Half-Chick, whisk him out of the pot and out of the window. Up, 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 high over the roofs, high over the towers and steeples he flew. "Only a little Half-Chick would act as you have," roared the wind, "and here's the place for a little Half-Chick." With that he dropped Half-Chick down bang on the top of a steeple. So little Half-Chick found himself at last nothing more than a weathercock. There, fastened tight to the top of the steeple, he stands to this very day on his one little leg, and he never has his own way any more, for he simply twirled this way and that, without even so much as a by your leave, however the wind blows. End of section 101.
Section 102 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeannie Hall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. A Letter from a Cat by Helen Hunt Jackson. I do not feel wholly sure that my pussy wrote these letters herself. They always came inside the letters written to me by my mamma or other friends, and I never caught pussy writing at any time when I was at home. But the printing was pretty bad, and they were signed by pussy's name, and my mamma always looked very mysterious when I asked about them, as if there were some very great secret about it all, so that until I grew to be a big girl, I never doubted but that pussy printed them all alone by herself after dark. They were written when I was a very little girl, and was away from home with my father on a journey. We made this journey in our own carriage, and it was one of the pleasantest things that ever happened to me. My clothes and my father's were packed in a little leather valise, which was hung by straps underneath the carriage, and went swinging, swinging, back and forth, as the wheels went round. My father and I used to walk up all the steep hills, because old Charlie, our horse, was not very strong, and I kept my eyes on that valise all the while I was walking behind the carriage. It seemed to me the most unsafe way to carry a valise, and I wished very much that my best dress had been put in a bundle that I could carry in my lap. This was the only drawback to the pleasure of my journey, my fear that the valise would fall off when we did not know it, and be left in the road, and then I should not have anything nice to wear when I reached my aunt's house. But the valise went through all safe, and I had the satisfaction of wearing my best dress every afternoon while I stayed. And I was foolish enough to think a great deal of this. On the 4th day after our arrival came a letter from my mamma, giving me a great many directions how to behave, and enclosing this first letter from Pussy. I carried both letters in my apron pocket all the time. They were the first letters ever I had received, and I was very proud of them. I showed them to everybody, and everybody laughed hard at Pussy's, and asked me if I believed that Pussy printed it herself. I thought perhaps my mamma held her paw, with the pen in it, as she had sometimes held my hand for me, and guided my pen to write a few words. I asked Papa to please ask Mamma in his letter if that were the way Pussy did it, but when his next letter from Mamma came, he read me this sentence out of it: "Tell Helen I did not hold Pussy's paw to write that letter." So then I felt sure Pussy did it herself, and as I told you, I had grown up to be quite a big girl before I began to doubt it. You see, I thought my Pussy such a wonderful Pussy that nothing was too remarkable for her to do. I knew very well that cats generally did not know how to read or write, but I thought there had never been such a cat in the world as this Pussy of mine. She was a little kitten when I first had her, but she grew fast and was very soon bigger than I wanted her to be. I wanted her to stay little. Her fur was a beautiful dark gray color, and there were black stripes on her side, like the stripes on a tiger. Her eyes were very big, and her ears unusually long and pointed. This made her look like a fox, and she was so bright and mischievous that some people thought she must be part fox. She used to do one thing that I never heard of any other cats doing. She used to play hide and seek. And the most wonderful part of it was that she took it up of her own accord. As soon as she heard me shut the gate in the yard at noon, when school was done, she would run up the stairs as hard as she could go and take her place at the top, where she could just peep through the banisters. When I opened the door, she would give a funny little mew, something like the mew cats make when they call their kittens. Then as soon as I stepped on the first stair to come up to her, she would race away at the top of her speed and hide under a bed. And when I reached the room, there would be no Pussy to be seen. If I called her, she would come out from under the bed, but if I left the room and went downstairs without speaking, in less than a minute she would fly back to her post at the head of the stairs and call again with a peculiar mew. As soon as I appeared, off she would run and hide under the bed as before. Sometimes she would do this 3 or 4 times. It was odd, though. She never would do it twice when other people were watching. When I called her and she came out from under the bed, if there were strangers looking on, she would walk straight to me in the demurest manner, as if it were a pure accident that she happened to be under that bed, and no matter what I did or said, her frolic was over for that day. She used to follow me just like a little dog wherever I went. She followed me to school every day, and we had great difficulty on Sundays to keep her from following us to church. Here is Kitty's first letter. My dear Helen, that is what your mother calls you, I know, for I jumped up on her writing table just now, and looked while she was out of the room, and I am sure I have as much right to call you so as she has, for if you were my own little kitty and looked just like me, I could not love you any more than I do. How many good naps I have had in your lap, and how many nice bits of meat you have saved for me out of your own dinner. Oh, I'll never let a rat or a mouse touch anything of yours so long as I live. I felt very unhappy after you drove off yesterday, and did not know what to do with myself. I went into the barn and thought I would take a nap on the hay. But it seemed so lonely without old Charlie stamping in his stall that I could not bear it, so I went into the garden and lay down under the damask rose bush. Now that your dear mother has taught me to print, I shall be able to say a great many things to you which I have often been unhappy about because I could not make you understand. I am entirely discouraged about learning to speak the English language, and I do not think anybody takes much trouble to learn ours, so we cats are confined entirely to the society of each other, which prevents our knowing so much as we might. When you are at home, I do not mind it, for although I cannot talk to you, I understand every word that you say to me, and we have such good plays together with the red ball. That is put away now in the bottom drawer of the little workstand in the sitting room. When your mother put it in, she turned round to me and said, 'Poor pussy, no more good plays for you till Helen comes home.' And I thought I should certainly cry. But I think it is very foolish to cry over what cannot be helped. So I pretended to have got something into my left eye and rubbed it with my paw. It is very seldom that I cry over anything, unless it is spilt milk. I must confess, I have often cried when that has happened. And it always is happening to cat's milk. They put it into old broken things that tip over at the least knock, and then they set them just where they are sure to be most in the way. Many's the time Josiah has knocked over that blue saucer of mine in the shed, and when you have thought that I had a nice breakfast of milk, I had nothing in the world but flies, which are not good for much more than just a little sort of relish. I am so glad of a chance to tell you about this, because I know when you come home, you will get a better dish for me. I hope you found the horse chestnuts which I put in the bottom of the carriage for you. I could not think of anything else to put in, which would remind you of me, but I am afraid you will never think that it was I who put them there, and it will be too bad if you don't, for I had a dreadful time climbing up over the dasher with them. There are 3 beautiful dandelions out on the terrace, but I don't suppose they will keep till you come home. A man has been doing something to your garden, but though I watched him very closely all the time, I could not make out what he was about. I am afraid it is something you will not like, but if I find out more about it, I will tell you in my next letter. Goodbye, your affectionate Pussy. End of section 102. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland. Section 103 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeannie Hall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Fairy and Child by Eugene Field. Oh, listen, little dear my soul, to the fairy voices calling, for the moon is high in the misty sky, and the honey dew is falling. To the midnight feast in the clover bloom the bluebells are a-ringing, and it's come away to the land of fay that the katydid is singing. Oh, slumber, little dear my soul, and hand in hand we'll wander, hand in hand to the beautiful land of Below, away off yonder. Or we'll sail along on a lily leaf into the white moon's halo, over a stream of mist and dream into the land of Below. Or you shall have 2 beautiful wings, 2 gossamer wings and airy, and all the while shall the old moon smile and think you a little fairy. And you shall dance in the velvet sky, and the silvery stars shall twinkle, and dream sweet dreams as over their beams your footfalls softly tinkle. End of section 103. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Section 104 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lyman Hopper. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Merchant by Rabindranath Tagore. Imagine, Mother, that you are to stay at home, and I am to travel into strange lands. Imagine that my boat is ready, at the landing, fully laden. Now think well, Mother, before you say what I shall bring for you when I come back. Mother, do you want heaps and heaps of gold? There, by the banks of golden streams, fields are full of golden harvest. And in the shade of the forest path, the golden champa flowers drop on the ground. I will gather them all for you in many hundred baskets. Mother, do you want pearls big as the raindrops of autumn? I shall cross to the Pearl Island shore. There, in the early morning light, pearls tremble on the meadow flowers, pearls drop on the grass, and pearls are scattered on the sand and spray by the wild sea waves. My brother shall have a pair of horses with wings to fly among the clouds. For father, I shall bring a magic pen that without his knowing will write of itself. For you, mother, I must have the casket and jewel that cost 7 kings their kingdoms. End of section 104. Recording by Lyman Hopper. Section 105 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lyman Hopper. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. A Sea Song from the Shore by James Whitcomb Riley. Hail ho! Sail ho! Ahoy! 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 Who calls to me so far at sea? Only a little boy. Sail ho! Hail ho! The sailor he sails the sea. I wish he would capture a little seahorse and send him home to me. I wish, as he sails through the tropical gales, he would catch me a seabird too, with its silver wings and the song it sings, and its breast of down and dew. I wish he would catch me a little mermaid, some island where he lands, with her dripping curls and her crown of pearls, and the looking-glass in her hands. End of section 105. Recording by Lyman Hopper.
Section 106 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Verity, Kendall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Come Little Leaves by George Cooper. Come, little leaves, said the wind one day, come over the meadows with me and play. Put on your dresses of red and gold, for summer is gone and the days grow cold. Soon the leaves heard the wind's loud call. Down they came fluttering, one and all. Over the brown fields they danced and flew, singing the sweet little songs they knew. Cricket, good-bye, we've been friends so long. Little brook, sing us your farewell song. Say you are sorry to see us go. Ah, you will miss us right well, we know. Dancing and whirling the little leaves went. Winter had called them, and they were content. Soon fast asleep in their earthy beds, the snow laid a coverlid over their heads. End of section 106. Recording by Verity, Kendall.
Section 107 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Maura, In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Across the Fields by Anatole France. After breakfast, Catherine goes out into the meadows with her little brother Jack. When they start out, the day is as young and fresh as they are. The sky is not exactly blue. It is rather gray, but a gray that is softer than all the blues in the world. Catherine's eyes are the very same gray, and seem made out of a piece of the morning sky. Catherine and Jack go quite alone into the meadows. Their mother is a farmer's wife and has work to do at the farm. They have no nurse to take them out, but then they don't need one. They know the way. They know the woods and the fields and the hills equally well. Catherine can even tell the time of day from seeing where the sun is in the sky, and she has knowledge of all kinds of nature's secrets that city children never dream of. Little Jack himself knows many things about the woods and ponds and mountains, for he has the soul of a true little country boy. The meadows Catherine and Jack go through are full of flowers, and on the way Catherine picks a bouquet of the pretty blossoms. She gathers blue flowers and poppies and cowslips, as well as buttercups or stewpans, as some call them. She gathers the dark spikes of the milkweed, and storks' bills and lilies of the valley, whose little bells give out such a delicious odor when stirred by the least bit of wind. Catherine loves the flowers because they are beautiful. She loves them, too, because they make such lovely ornaments. She is only a simple little country girl with her pretty hair hidden under a brown cap. Her cotton apron covers a plain little dress, and she wears wooden shoes. But there are things which little girls know from the day they are born. Catherine knows that flowers make fine trimmings, and that lovely ladies who put bouquets in their corsages look even lovelier for doing so. So she thinks she must be very fine indeed, just now because she has a bouquet as big as her head. Her ideas are as fine and airy as her flowers. There are ideas that you can't put into words. There are no words good enough for them. They require tunes and songs, lively and sweet, and gay and gentle. So Catherine sings while she gathers her flowers, bits from her nursery songs, I'm going to the woods alone, or my heart I give to him, my heart I give to him. Little Jack is a different sort altogether. He has other ideas. He is a regular boy. He isn't out of petticoats yet, but his spirit is ahead of his years, and there's no spirit finer than that. Though he keeps a good hold on his sister's apron with one hand for fear of falling, he lays his switch about him with the other hand with all the strength of a sturdy boy. His father's head workman doesn't crack his whip any louder over his horses' heads when he leads them back from the river. Little Jack is not going to spend his time in soft sleep and dreams. He doesn't care anything about wildflowers. For his make-believes he thinks of hard work. He makes believe about carts stuck in the muddy roads and percheron horses tugging at their collars as he shouts at them. Catherine and Jack climb up above the fields on the slope of the hill to a little knoll where they can see all the fires of the village scattered through the foliage, and toward the horizon the steeples of 6 different parishes. It is a place which makes you realize how great the world is. Catherine thinks she can understand better now the stories that have been told her about the dove and the ark and the people of Israel in the promised land, and of Jesus journeying from one village to another. Let's sit down here, she says. She seats herself and, spreading her hands, scatters her flowery harvest round her. Her little body has been perfumed with them all, and in a moment the butterflies are circling round her. She picks and arranges the flowers and makes garlands and crowns of them, and hangs little bells at her ears for earrings. Little Jack, occupied with his imaginary horses, catches sight of her thus dressed up, and at once is seized with admiration. A pious thought strikes his little soul. He stops, and the whip falls from his hands. He sees that she is beautiful. He would like to be beautiful too, and covered with flowers. He tries to express his wish in his pretty obscure way, and though he feels that he tries in vain, Catherine understands. Little Catherine is a big sister, and a big sister is a little mother. Yes, dearie, cries Catherine, I'll make you a beautiful crown, and you'll look like a king. So here she is, plaiting together blue and red and yellow flowers into a chaplet. She puts the crown of flowers on little Jack's head, and he turns red with joy. She puts her arms round him and lifts him off the ground, and stands him all covered with flowers on a great stone nearby. She admires him now because he is beautiful, and because it is she that has made him so. Standing upright on his rustic pedestal, little Jack understands that he is beautiful, and the idea gives him a deep respect for himself. He realizes that he is sacred, stiff, immovable, his eyes round, his lips shut tight, his arms hanging, his hands open, and his fingers sticking out like the spokes of a wheel. He tastes a solemn joy. The sky is over his head. The woods and the fields are at his feet. He is in the middle of the world. He is only good, only beautiful. End of section 107. Recording by Maura from Minneapolis.
Section 108 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lyman Hopper. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Little Toyland of the Dutch. Away, way off, cross the seas and such, lies the little flat land of the Dutch, where the green toy meadows stretch off to the sea, with a little canal where a fence ought to be, where the windmill's arms go round, 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 and sing to the cows with a creaky sound, where storks live up in the chimney top, and wooden shoes pound, plop, 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 where little toy houses stand in a row, and dog carts clattering past them go, where milk cans shine in the shiniest way, and the housemaids scrub, scrub, scrub all day, where dikes keep out the raging sea, and shut in the land as cozy as can be. Oh, that little toy land, I like it much, that prim little, trim little land of the Dutch. End of section 108. Recording by Lyman Hopper. Section 109 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lyman Hopper. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Teeny Tiny. Once upon a time, there was a teeny tiny woman who lived in a teeny tiny house in a teeny tiny village. Now, one day, this teeny tiny woman put on her teeny tiny bonnet and went out of her teeny tiny house to take a teeny tiny walk. And when this teeny tiny woman had gone a teeny tiny way, she came to a teeny tiny gate. So the teeny tiny woman opened the teeny tiny gate and went into a teeny tiny garden. And when this teeny tiny woman had got into the teeny tiny garden, she saw a teeny tiny scarecrow, and the teeny tiny scarecrow wore a teeny tiny bonnet and a teeny tiny dress. And the teeny tiny woman said, "That teeny tiny bonnet and that teeny tiny dress will fit my teeny tiny self." So the teeny tiny woman hung the teeny tiny dress and the teeny tiny bonnet over her teeny tiny arm and went home to her teeny tiny house. Now when the teeny tiny woman got home to her teeny tiny house, she was a teeny tiny bit tired, so she went up to her teeny tiny stairs to her teeny tiny bed and put the teeny tiny dress and the teeny tiny bonnet into a teeny tiny closet. And when this teeny tiny woman had been to sleep a teeny tiny time, she was awakened by a teeny tiny voice from the teeny tiny closet, which said, "Give me my clothes." And this teeny tiny woman was a teeny bit flustered, so she hid her teeny tiny head under the teeny tiny bedclothes and went to sleep again. And when she had been to sleep again a teeny tiny time, the teeny tiny voice cried out from the teeny tiny closet, a teeny tiny louder, Give me my clothes." This made the teeny-tiny woman a teeny-tiny bit more flustered, so she hid her teeny-tiny head a teeny-tiny further under the teeny-tiny bedclothes, and when the teeny-tiny woman had been to sleep again a teeny-tiny time, the teeny-tiny voice from the teeny-tiny cupboard said again a teeny-tiny louder, "Give me my clothes." And this teeny-tiny woman put her teeny-tiny head out of the teeny-tiny bedclothes and said in her loudest teeny-tiny voice, "Take 'em." End of section 109. Recording by Lyman Hopper.
Section 110 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Shingebis, a Chippewa Indian Tale. In his lodge on the shores of the great Lake Huron lived a little brown duck, Shingebis. When the fierce north wind swept down from the white and glittering land of snow, 4 great logs for firewood had little brown duck Shingebis, one for each month of the winter. Brave and cheery was Shingebis, and no matter how the north wind raged, he waddled out across the ice and found what food he needed. With his strong bill he pulled frozen rushes up from the pond, and dived down through the holes they left to get his fish for supper. Then away to his lodge he went, dragging a string of fish behind him. By his blazing fire he cooked his supper and made himself warm and comfortable. So at last the north wind shrieked angrily, "Woo! Woo! Who dares to brave the big chief North Wind? All other creatures fear him, but little brown duck Shingebis heeds big chief North Wind no more than Minnewawa, little gently blowing squaw breeze." So the north wind sent out cold icy blasts and made high drifts of snow, till not a bird or beast dared venture forth, save Shingebis. Shingebis went out the same as before, and paid no heed to the weather. He got his fish every day, and cooked his supper every night, and warmed himself by his glowing fire. "Ah!" raged the north wind, "little brown duck Shingebis cares not for snow or ice or wind. Big Chief North Wind will freeze his holes so he gets no food, and then Big Chief will conquer him." So he visited the holes in the ice where Shingebis fished, breathed into them and froze them up tight. Then he heaped up over the pond a mighty mound of snow. But when Shingebis came and found his holes all closed, so he could not reach the water, he did not even murmur. He went cheerily on till he found a pond that was free of snow and had more rushes. Then he pulled up the rushes and made new holes through which he could do his fishing. North Wind grew angrier still. "Brown duck shall know who is Big Chief," he howled, and for days he followed close on the little duck's footsteps, froze up his holes in the ice almost as soon as he made them, and covered his ponds with snow. But Shingebis walked fearlessly forth as before, and always managed to get a few fish before each hole was frozen, or found some other pond that was free and made new holes. But he still went cheerily home every night, dragging his fish behind him. At last the north wind roared in a fury. "Woo! Woo! Big Chief, go to Brown Duck's lodge, blow in at his door, sit down beside him and breathe icy breath till he freezes." Now Shingebis had just eaten his supper. His log was burning bright, and he sat cozily warming his little webbed feet by the blaze. Carefully North Wind crept up to his door, holding his breath so Shingebis should not know he was coming. Quietly he crept along over the snow, but Shingebis felt the icy cold come in through the cracks at the door. "I know who is there," he thought, and he began to sing sturdily. "Kandice, kandice, bean, bean, bonin, bonin, oki, oki, kawiwa, kawiwa." Now the North Wind knew this was his way of saying, North Wind, fierce in feature, you are still my fellow creature. Blow your worst, you can't freeze me, I fear you not, and so I'm free." Then North Wind was angrier than ever. "Little brown duck, to sing so boldly, Big Chief can bite him, sting him, freeze him." So North Wind crept in under the door, slipping up behind Shingebiss, and sat down by the fire. Now Shingebiss knew he was there, but he paid him no heed. He kept on singing louder than ever, "Kandice, kandice, bean, bean." "Big Chief stays here till he freezes," whistled North Wind, and he tried to breathe more fiercely than ever. But at that moment Shingebiss stirred his fire till the sparks leapt up, the smoke flew, and the log glowed ruddy gold. Then all at once North Wind's frosty hair began to drip. His icy beard began to drip, the tears ran down his cheeks, and his breath came puffing more and more faintly. Still Shingebiss warmed his little web feet by the blaze and sang, North Wind, fierce in feature, you are still my fellow creature." At length North Wind gave a shriek, "Big Chief is melting!" and he rushed headlong through the doorway, fled out into the darkness, and fell upon a snowbank. "Strange little brown duck, Shingebiss," he murmured weakly. "Big Chief North Wind can't starve him, can't freeze him, can't make him afraid. North Wind will let him alone. The Great Spirit is with him." End of Shingebiss, a Chippewa Indian Tale.
Section 111 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Federica. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. 10 Little Injuns. 10 little Injuns standing in a line. One went home, and then there were 9. 9 little Injuns swinging on a gate. One jumped off, and then there were 8. 8 little Injuns staying at a tavern. One went away, and then there were 7. 7 little Injuns playing pretty tricks. One went to ride, and then there were 6. 6 little Injuns learning how to dive. One swam away, and then there were 5. 5 little Injuns peeped through the door. One ran behind, and then there were 4. 4 little Injuns climbed up a tree. One slid down, and then there were 3. 3 little Injuns out in a canoe. One hopped on land, and then there were 2. 2 little Injuns playing in the sun. One fell asleep, and then there was 1. 1 little Injun playing all alone. He went in the house, and then there was none. End of section 111. Recording by Federica.
Section 112 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Shoemaker and the Elves, a German folk tale. Once upon a time, there was a shoemaker who worked hard and was very honest, but still he could not earn enough to keep himself and his wife. At last there came a day when all he had was gone except one piece of leather, just enough to make 1 pair of shoes. He cut out the shoes, ready to stitch and make up the next day, and left them on the bench, meaning to get up early in the morning to work. He lived a good, pure life, so his heart was light amidst all his troubles, and he went peacefully to bed, trusting that he could finish the shoes the next day and sell them. Leaving all his cares to heaven, he fell asleep. Bright and early the next morning, he arose, went to his workbench, and lo and behold, there stood the shoes already made upon the table. They were beautifully made, too. All was so neat and true, there was not one false stitch. Yet There was no sign of anyone's having been there. The good man and his wife knew not what to say or think of this strange event. But the first customer that came in was so pleased with the beautiful shoes that he bought them and paid so much for them that the shoemaker was able to buy leather enough to make 2 pairs of shoes. In the evening he cut out the shoes and went to bed early so as to get up early the next day and begin stitching. But he was saved all the trouble, for when he got up in the morning, there were 2 pairs of shoes on the bench, all finished and beautifully made, and once again no sign that anyone had been there. That day, in came customers who paid the shoemaker handsomely for his goods, so that he was able now to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. Once more he cut out the shoes, and left them on the bench, and in the morning all 4 pairs were made. And so it went on for some time. What was got ready by evening was already done by daybreak, until the good man and his wife were thriving and prosperous. But they could not be satisfied to have so much done for them, and not know to whom they should be grateful. One evening about Christmas time, as they were sitting over the fire and chatting together, the shoemaker said to his wife, "I should like to sit up and watch tonight, that we may see who it is that comes and does my work for me." The wife liked the thought, so they left a light burning, hid themselves in the corner of the room behind a curtain, and waited to see what would happen. Just as the clock struck 12, 2 tiny elves came dancing into the room, hopped onto the bench, took up the work that was cut out, and began to ply their little fingers, stitching and rapping and tapping at such a rate that the shoemaker was amazed and could not take his eyes off them. These little elves were quite naked, but they had wee little scissors and hammers and thread. Tap, tap went the little hammers, stitch, stitch went the thread. No one ever worked so fast as they. On they went until the job was quite finished, and the shoes stood ready for use upon the table. Then the tiny elves took hold of each other's hands and danced around the shoes on the bench. The shoemaker and his wife had hard work not to laugh aloud at the sight. But at daybreak, the little creatures danced away out of the windows and left the room as it was before. The shoemaker and his wife looked at each other and said, "These little wights have made us rich and happy. How can we thank them and do them a good service in return? I am sorry to see them run about as they do with nothing on their backs to keep off the cold. I should like to make them some pretty clothes, a coat and a waistcoat and a pair of trousers into the bargain," said the wife. "And I will make each of them a little pair of shoes," said her husband. That very day they set about it. The wife cut out 2 tiny coats of green, 2 weeny waistcoats of yellow, 2 little pairs of trousers of white, 2 bits of caps, bright red, for everyone knows the elves love bright colors, and her husband made 2 little pairs of shoes with long pointed toes. They made the wee clothes as dainty as could be, with nice little stitches and pretty buttons, and by Christmas time they were finished. On Christmas Eve, the shoemaker cleaned his bench, and on it, instead of leather, he laid the 2 sets of gay little fairy clothes. Then he and his wife hid away as before to see what the elves would do. Promptly at midnight they came in and hopped upon the bench to do their work, but when they saw the little clothes they laughed and danced for joy. Each one caught up his clothes and put them on in the twinkling of an eye. Then they looked at each other and began to dance and caper and prance in a circle. But just as the sun rose, they danced out of the window, over the green and out of sight, and the shoemaker saw them no more. From that day on, all went well with the shoemaker and his wife, and they never needed any more help. End of section 112. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Section 113 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Dow. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. A Halloween Story by Elizabeth Thompson Dillingham. Once upon a time, a big orange pumpkin was growing just outside a stone wall, far off in a field, all alone. The farmer had gathered all his pumpkins and stored them carefully in his great barn, but no one knew of the big orange pumpkin growing just outside the wall, all alone. The big orange pumpkin was lonely. "I wish I belonged to someone," said he. "Mew, mew, I do too," cried a little black pussy cat, stretching herself and jumping down from the stone wall where she had been sleeping. "It will soon be winter," said the big orange pumpkin. "Let's go find someone to belong to." "Yes, let's do," said the little black cat eagerly. "I want to belong to a little girl with a sweet face and shining eyes." "And I," said the big orange pumpkin, "want to belong to a jolly little boy who whistles and sings when he works. Let's hurry right away to find them." "Yes, let's do," said the little black cat. So off they started, the big orange pumpkin rolling and tumbling along and chuckling to himself as he went, and the little black cat pit-a-patting along on her soft little cushions, purring because she was happy. On and on they went, over the fields and through the woods. It began to grow cold, oh, so cold, and dark too. The little black cat shivered as the wind whistled through the trees. "See here," said the big orange pumpkin, "you can't sleep outdoors tonight. What shall we do?" Just then they saw a man coming down the path with a bundle of wood on his back. "Ho, Mr. Woodcutter!" cried the pumpkin. "Have you a knife?" "That I have," said the merry woodsman. "What can I do you for, my fine fellow?" "Just cut off a piece of my shell where the stem is and scoop out some of my seeds, if you please," said the pumpkin. No sooner said than done. "There, my little black pussy cat," said the pumpkin. "When you wish to sleep tonight, you may curl inside and be as warm as a sunbeam." "But will you not come home with me?" asked the woodsman. "Have you a little girl with a sweet face and shining eyes?" asked the little black pussy cat. "Have you a jolly little boy who whistles and sings when he works?" asked the big orange pumpkin. No, said the woodsman, "but I have a pig and some hens." "Then we'll go on," said the pumpkin, "but thank you kindly." So on they went and on until the stars began to shine. Then the tired little pussy cat curled in her hollow nest, put on the cover, and went to sleep. In the morning they went on again, but before long it began to rain. The pussy cat's soft fur was soon very wet. "You poor little thing," said the big orange pumpkin, "curl inside your house and I will trundle you along." "But it's so dark inside, and I couldn't see where we were going," cried the pussy cat, holding up a tiny, dripping paw. "Windows!" cried the pumpkin. "Of course! Windows! How stupid of me! Wait here under this fence, my little friend, until I come back." Then off he hurried across the road to a carpenter's shop. "Ho, Mr. Carpenter!" cried the pumpkin. "Have you a knife?" "That I have," said the jolly carpenter. "What can I do you for, my fine fellow?" "Just cut some windows for me, if you please." So the carpenter took a sharp knife and cut 4 windows. Just like a face he made them, 2 for the eyes, 1 for a nose, and 1 for a mouth, and he laughed as he did it. When he finished the mouth, the pumpkin laughed too. "Ha, ha, ha!" cried he. "What a relief to have a mouth to laugh with! Ha, ha, ha!" And he laughed all the way back in the rain to where the little shivering pussy cat was waiting. And she laughed too, and climbed inside her coach and put on the cover. So on through the rain they went, and on and on. Just as dark was drawing near, they came to a wee brown house by the side of the road. In the yard was a little boy picking up chips and putting them into a big basket. He whistled as he worked, and then he began to sing. "If wishes were horses, then beggars might ride. If turnips were watches, I'd wear one by my side." Then the door opened, and a little girl with a sweet face and shining eyes stood on the threshold. "What do you wish, John?" she called. "Oh," laughed the boy as he came in with the chips, "I wish I had a pumpkin for a jack-o'-lantern, for this is Halloween." "And I wish I had a pussy cat to love," said the little girl. "This is the place for us," whispered the big orange pumpkin, and he rolled up to the door, bumpity-bump. "Look, John!" cried the little girl. "Here's your jack-o'-lantern. The fairies must have sent it. Isn't it a beauty?" "There's something inside," said John, snatching off the cover, and out jumped a tiny black pussy-cat straight into the little girl's arms. "Oh, oh!" they cried. And when Mother came home in the dark, a jolly jack-o'-lantern with a candle inside was shining out of the window at her, and close beside it sat a little black pussy-cat. End of section 113. Recording by KerrieRae.
Section 114 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Crystal Treader. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Oyvind and Marit. A Little Story of Norway. By Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson. Oyvind was his name. A low rocky cliff overhung the house where he was born. Fir and birch trees looked down upon the roof, and the wild cherries strewed flowers over it. On this roof lived a little goat belonging to Oyvind. It was kept there that it might not wander away, and Oyvind carried leaves and grass up to it. One fine day the goat leaped down and ran off to the cliff. It went straight up and soon stood where it had never been before. Oyvind did not see the goat when he came out in the afternoon, and thought at once of the fox. He grew hot all over, looked round about. He called, "Here, goat! Here, goat! Here, goat!" "Bah!" answered the goat from the top of the hill, putting its head on one side and looking down. At the side of the goat there was kneeling a little girl. "Is this goat yours?" asked she. Oyvind opened wide his mouth and eyes, thrust both hands into his breeches, and said, "Who are you?" "I am Marit, mother's little one, father's fiddle, the elf in the house, granddaughter to Ola Nordistuen of the Heide Farms, 4 years old in the autumn, I am." "Is that who you are?" cried he, drawing a long breath, for he had not dared to take one while she was speaking. "Is this goat yours?" she asked again. "Yes," replied he. "I like it so very much. Will you not give it to me?" "No, indeed, I will not." She lay flat on the ground staring down at him, and soon she said, "But if I give you a twisted bun for the goat, may I have it then?" Oyvind was the son of poor people. He had tasted twisted bun only once in his life. That was when grandfather came to his house, and he had never eaten anything so good before or since. He fixed his eyes on the little girl. "Let me see the bun first," said he. She was not long in showing him a large twisted bun that she held in her hand. "Here it is," cried she, and tossed it down to him. "Oh, it broke in pieces," said the boy, picking up every bit with the greatest care. He could not help tasting of the very smallest morsel, and it was so good that he had to try another, till before he knew it he had eaten up the whole bun. "Now the goat belongs to me," said the girl. The boy stopped with the last bit in his mouth. The girl lay there laughing, and the goat stood by her side, with its white breast and shining brown hair looking sideways down. "Could you not wait a while?" begged the boy, his heart beginning to beat fast. The girl laughed more than ever, and quickly got up on her knees. "No, the goat is mine," said she, and threw her arms about it. Then, loosening one of her garters, she fastened it about its neck. Oyvind watched her. She rose to her feet and began to tug at the goat.
it would not go along with her, and stretched its neck over the edge of the cliff toward Oyvind. "Bah!" said the goat. Then the little girl took hold of its hair with one hand, pulled at the garter with the other, and said prettily, "Come on, goat, you shall go into the sitting room and eat from mother's dish and my apron." And then she sang, "Come, boys, pretty goatie, come, calf, my delight, come here, mewing pussy, in shoes snowy white. Yellow ducks from your shelter, come forth helter-skelter, come, doves ever beaming, with soft feathers gleaming." There the boy stood. He had taken care of the goat ever since winter when it was born, and he never dreamed that he could lose it. But now it was gone in a moment, and he would never see it again. His mother came up humming from the beach, with some wooden pails she had been scouring. She saw the boy sitting on the grass with his legs crossed under him, crying, and she went to him. "What makes you cry?" "Oh, my goat, my goat!" "Why, where is the goat?" asked the mother, looking up at the roof. "It will never come back any more," said the boy. "Dear me, how can that be?" Oyvind would not tell what he had done at first. "Has the fox carried it off?" "Oh, I wish it were the fox." "Then what has become of it?" cried the mother. "Oh, oh, oh! I happened to sell it for a twisted bun." As soon as he spoke, the boy understood what he had done. To sell his pet goat for a bun! He had not thought about it before. The mother said, "What do you suppose the little goat thinks of you, when you were willing to sell it for a twisted bun?" The boy thought this over, and he felt perfectly sure that he could never be happy again. He was so sorry for what he had done that he promised himself he would never do anything wrong again. Neither cut the cord of a spinning wheel, nor let the sheep loose, nor go down to the sea alone. He fell asleep lying there dreaming about his goat. Then something wet was thrust right against his ear, and he started up. "Bah!" he heard, and it was the goat that had returned to him. "What! You have come back again?" He sprang up, seized it by the two forelegs, and danced about with it as if it were a brother. He pulled it by the beard, and it was on the point of going in to his mother with it when he heard someone behind him and saw the little girl sitting on the grass beside him. Now he understood why the goat had come back, and he let go of it. "Is it you who have brought the goat?" She sat tearing up the grass with her hands and said, "I was not allowed to keep it. Grandfather is up there waiting." While the boy stood staring at her, a sharp voice from the road called above, "Well?" Then she remembered what she had been told to do. She rose, walked up to Oyvind, thrust one of her dirt-covered hands into his, and turning her face away, said, "I beg your pardon." But then her courage was all gone. She flung her arms about the goat and burst into tears. "I believe you had better keep the goat," stammered Oyvind, looking the other way. "Make haste now," called her grandfather from the hill. So Marit turned and walked slowly towards him. "You have forgotten your garter," Oyvind shouted after her. She turned and looked at him. Then she answered in a choked voice, "You may keep it." He walked up to her, took her hand and said, "I thank you." "Oh, it's nothing to thank for," she answered, but she still sobbed as she walked away. Oyvind sat down on the grass again, the goat roaming about near him, but he was no longer happy with it as before. The goat was fastened near the house, but Oyvind wandered away, with his eyes fixed on the cliff. His mother came and sat down beside him. He asked her to tell him stories about things that were far away, for now the goat no longer satisfied him. So his mother told him how once everything could talk. The mountain talked to the brook to the river to the sea, and the sea to the sky. The sky talked to the clouds to the trees to the grass to the flies to the beasts to the children, and the children to grown people. So it went on, and round in a circle. As she talked, Oyvind looked at the cliff, the trees, the sea, and the sky, and it seemed to him he had never truly seen them before. The cat came out just then and stretched itself on the doorstep in the sunshine. "What does the cat say?" asked Oyvind. The mother sang, "Evening sunshine softly is dying, on the doorstep lazy puss is lying. Well filled am I and sleek, and very lazy and meek," says the pussy. Then the cock came strutting up with all his hens. "What does the cock say?" asked Oyvind, clapping his hands. His mother sang, "Mother hen, her wings now are sinking, rooster on one leg stands thinking. Seek your shelter, hens, I pray, gone is the sun to his rest for today," says the cock. "What are the birds saying?" asked Oyvind, and laughed. "Dear Lord, how pleasant is life for those who have neither toil nor strife," says the birds. Thus he learned what all were saying, even to the ant crawling in the moss and the worm working in the bark of the trees. The same summer his mother began to teach him to read. Then one day she said to him, "Tomorrow school begins again, and you are going." Oyvind had heard that school was a place where boys played together, and he was greatly pleased. He walked faster than his mother up the hillside, so eager was he. When they came to the schoolhouse, a loud buzzing like that from the mill at home met them, and he asked his mother what it was. "It is the children reading," answered she. On entering he saw many children around a table. Others sat at their dinner pails along the wall. Some stood in little groups around a large printed card covered with numbers. The schoolmaster, an old grey-haired man, was sitting on a stool by the chimney corner. They all looked up as Oyvind and his mother came in, and the mill hum ceased as if the water had been suddenly turned off. The mother bowed to the schoolmaster, who returned her greeting. "I have come here to bring a little boy who wants to learn to read," said the mother. "What is his name?" asked the schoolmaster. "Oyvind. He knows his letters and he can spell." "You don't say so," said the schoolmaster. "Come here, little Whitehead." Oyvind went over to him, and the schoolmaster took him on his lap and raised his cap. "What a nice little boy," said he, and stroked his hair. Oyvind looked up into his eyes and laughed. "Is it at me you are laughing?" asked the schoolmaster with a frown. "Yes, it is," answered Oyvind, and roared with laughter. At that the schoolmaster laughed. Oyvind's mother laughed. The children understood that they also were allowed to laugh, and so they all laughed together. When Oyvind was to take his seat, all the scholars wished to make room for him. He, on his part, looked about for a long time. Then he spied, near the hearthstone, close beside him, sitting on a little red painted box, Merit, with many names. She had hidden her face behind both hands and sat peeping out at him. "I will sit here," cried Oyvind at once, and, seizing a lunch box, he seated himself at her side. Now she raised the arm nearest him a little, and peered at him from under her elbow. Forthwith he, too, covered his face with both hands, and looked at her from under his elbow. Thus they sat cutting up capers until the reading began again. The children read aloud, each from his book, high little voices piping up, and lower voices drumming, while here and there one chimed in to be heard above all the rest. In all his life Oeyvind had never had such fun. "Is it always like this here?" he whispered to Marit. "Yes, always," said she. Later they too had to go forward to the schoolmaster to read. Then they were allowed to sit quietly down again. "I have a goat now myself," said Marit. "Have you?" cried Oeyvind, and that was the very best thing he learned on his first day at school. End of section 114. Recording by Crystal Treader.
Section 115 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Little pictures from far Japan. Add but a handle to the moon, and what a pretty fan it makes. Solkan, 1456 to 1554. Chrysanthemums in bloom, their colors like a paint dish. Come, butterflies, and dally o'er them. Ransietshu, 1654-1707. The old years passed away, the city now from end to end, with flowers and lights is gay. Ranko, 1728-99. Lo, Matsu, in his father's name, come to present his New Year's greetings. Yaka, 1663-1740. End of section 115.
Section 116 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Federica. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Boy Who Cried Wolf, adapted from Aesop. There was a young shepherd boy who tended his sheep at the foot of a mountain near a deep forest. It was rather lonely for him there all day, so he thought of a plan by which he could cause some excitement and get some companions to join him. He rushed down towards the village, calling out, "Wolf! Wolf!" And the villagers, thinking his flock had been attacked by a wolf, hurried out to help him. Even when they found there was no wolf there, some of them stayed with him for a long time. This pleased the boy so much that a few days afterwards he tried the same trick again, and the villagers once more came to his help. But shortly after this, a wolf really did come out from the forest and began to worry the sheep. The boy of course cried out, "Wolf! Wolf!" still louder than before. But this time, though he shouted with all his might, the villagers, who had been fooled twice before, thought the boy was again playing a trick on them, and nobody stirred to come to his help. So the wolf made off with a large part of the flock, and when the boy complained of what had happened to him, the wise man of the village said, "He who tells what is untrue will not be believed even when he speaks the truth." End of section 116. Recording by Federica.
Section 117 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Verity, Kendall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Duck and the Kangaroo by Edward Lear. Please give me a ride on your back, said the Duck to the Kangaroo. I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through. And we'd go to the Dee and the Jelly Bo Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride, oh do, said the Duck to the Kangaroo. End of section 117. Recording by Verity Kendall.
Section 118 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Star by Jane Taylor. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. When the blazing sun is gone, when he nothing shines upon, then you show your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night. Then the traveler in the dark thanks you for your tiny spark. He could not see which way to go, if you did not twinkle so. In the dark blue sky you keep, and often through my curtains peep, for you never shut your eye till the sun is in the sky. And your bright and tiny spark lights the traveler in the dark, though I know not what you are. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. End of section 118.
Section 119 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Peter Rabbit Decides to Change His Name by Thornton W. Burgesses. Peter Rabbit, I don't see what Mother Nature ever gave me such a common-sounding name as that for. People laugh at me, but if I had a fine-sounding name, they wouldn't laugh. Some folks say that a name doesn't amount to anything, but it does. If I should do some wonderful thing, nobody would think anything of it. No, sir, nobody would think anything of it at all, just because it was done by Peter Rabbit. Peter Rabbit was talking out loud, but he was talking to himself. He sat in the dear old briar patch with an ugly scowl on his usually happy face. The sun was shining, the merry little breezes of Old Mother West Wind were dancing over the green meadows, the birds were singing, and happiness, the glad, joyous happiness of springtime, was everywhere but in Peter Rabbit's heart. There seemed to be no room for anything but discontent, and such foolish discontent with his name. And yet, you know, there are lots of little people just as foolish as Peter Rabbit. Well, what are you going to do about it? The voice made Peter Rabbit jump and turn around hastily. There was Jimmy Skunk poking his head in at the opening of one of Peter's private little paths. He was grinning, and Peter knew by that grin that Jimmy had heard what he had said. Peter didn't know what to say. He hung his head in a very shamefaced way. "You've got something to learn," said Jimmy Skunk. "What is it?" asked Peter. "It is just this," replied Jimmy. "There is nothing in a name except just what we choose to make it. It lies with us and no one else, how other folks shall take it. It's what we do and what we say and how we live each passing day that makes it big or makes it small, or even worse than none at all. A name just stands for what we are. It's what we choose to make it, and that's the way and only way that other folks will take it." Peter Rabbit made a face at Jimmy Skunk. "I don't like being preached to." "I'm not preaching. I'm just telling you what you ought to know without being told," replied Jimmy Skunk. "If you don't like your name, why don't you change it?" "What's that?" cried Peter sharply. "If you don't like your name, why don't you change it?" repeated Jimmy. Peter sat up and the disagreeable frown had left his face. I hadn't thought of that," he said slowly. "Do you suppose I could, Jimmy Skunk?" "Easiest thing in the world," replied Jimmy Skunk. "Just decide what name you would like, and then ask all your friends to call you by it." "I believe I will," cried Peter Rabbit. "Well, let me know what it is when you have decided," said Jimmy as he started for home. And all the way up the Crooked Little Path Jimmy chuckled to himself as he thought of foolish Peter Rabbit trying to change his name. Part 2. Peter finds a name. Peter Rabbit had quite lost his appetite. When Peter forgets to eat, you may make up your mind that Peter has something very important to think about. At least, he has something on his mind that he thinks is important. The fact is, Peter had fully made up his mind to change his name. He thought Peter Rabbit too common a name, but when he tried to think of a better one, he found that no name he could think of really pleased him any more. So he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought. Now Jimmy Skunk was the only one to whom Peter had told how discontented he was with his name, and it was Jimmy who had suggested to Peter to change it. Jimmy thought it a great joke, and he straightway passed the word along among all the little meadow and forest people that Peter Rabbit was going to change his name. Everybody laughed and chuckled over the thought of Peter Rabbit's foolishness, and they planned to have a great deal of fun with Peter as soon as he should tell him his new name. Peter was sitting on the edge of the old briar patch one morning when old Mr. Buzzard passed, lying low. "Good morning, Briar Cottontail," said old Mr. Buzzard with a twinkle in his eye. At first Peter didn't understand that old Mr. Buzzard was talking to him, and by the time he did it was too late to reply, for old Mr. Buzzard was on his way up the blue, blue sky. "Cottontail, Cottontail," said Peter over and over to himself, and began to smile. Every time he said it he liked it better. Cottontail, Peter Cottontail. How much better sounding that is than Peter Rabbit. That sounds as if I was really somebody. Yes, sir, that's the very name I want. Now I must send word to all my friends that hereafter I am no longer Peter Rabbit, but Peter Cottontail. Peter kicked up his heels in just the funny way as he always does when he is pleased. Suddenly he remembered that such a fine, long, high-sounding name as Peter Cottontail demanded dignity. So he stopped kicking up his heels and began to practice putting on airs. But first he called to the Merry Little Breezes and told them about his change of name, and asked them to tell his friends that in the future he would not answer to the name of Peter Rabbit, but only to the name of Peter Cottontail. He was very grave and earnest and important as he explained it to the Merry Little Breezes. The Merry Little Breezes kept their faces straight while he was talking, but as soon as they had left him to carry his message, they burst out laughing. It was such a joke. And they giggled as they delivered his message to each of the little forest and meadow people. Peter Rabbit's changed his name. In the future, without fail, you must call him, if you please, Mr. Peter Cottontail. While they were doing this, Peter was back in the old briar patch, practicing new airs and trying to look very high and mighty and important, as became one with such a fine-sounding name as Peter Cottontail. Part 3. There's nothing like the old name after all. Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk had their heads together. Now when these two put their heads together, you may make up your mind that they are planning mischief. Yes, sir, there was sure mischief to be afoot when Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk put their heads together, as they were doing now. Had Peter Rabbit seen them, he might have not felt so easy in his mind as he did. But Peter didn't see them. He was too taken up with trying to look as important as his new name sounded. He was putting on airs and holding his head very high as he went down to the Smiling Pond to call on Jimmy Muskrat. Whenever anyone called him by his first name, Peter pretended not to hear. He pretended that he had never heard that name and didn't know that he was being spoken to. Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk thought it a great joke, and they made up their minds that they would have some fun with Peter and perhaps make him see how foolish he was. Yes, sir, they planned to teach Peter a lesson. Bobby Coon hurried away to find Reddy Fox and tell him that Peter had gone down to the Smiling Pond, and that if he hid beside the path, he might catch Peter on the way back. Jimmy Skunk hunted up Blacky the Crow and Sammy Jay and told him of his plan and what he wanted them to do. Of course they promised that they would. Then he went to old Mr. Buzzard and told him. Old Mr. Buzzard grinned and promised that he would do his share. Then Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk hid where they could see all that would happen. Peter reached the Smiling Pond and now sat on the bank admiring his own reflection in the water and talking to Jerry Muskrat. He had just told Jerry that when his old name was called out, he didn't hear it any more. When along came Blacky the Crow. "Hello, Peter Rabbit. You're just the fellow I am looking for. I have a very important message for you," shouted Blacky. Peter kept right on talking with Jerry Muskrat, just as if he didn't hear, although he was burning with curiosity to know what the message was. "I say, Peter Rabbit, are you deaf?" shouted Blacky the Crow. Jerry Muskrat looked up at Blacky and winked. "Peter Rabbit isn't here," said he. "This is Peter Cottontail." "Oh," said Blacky, "my message is for Peter Rabbit. It's something he really ought to know. And with that, away flew Blacky the Crow, chuckling to himself. Peter looked quite as uncomfortable as he felt, but of course he couldn't say a word after boasting that he didn't hear people who called him Peter Rabbit. Pretty soon along came Sammy Jay. Sammy seemed very much excited. "Oh, Peter Rabbit, I'm so glad I found you," he cried. "I've some very important news for you." Peter had all he could do to sit still and pretend not to hear, but he did. "This is Peter Cottontail," said Jerry Muskrat, winking at Sammy Jay. "Oh," replied Sammy, "my news is for Peter Rabbit," and off he flew, chuckling to himself. Peter looked and felt more uncomfortable than ever. He bade Jerry Muskrat good day and started for the old dear briar patch to think things over. When he was halfway there, old Mr. Buzzard came sailing down out of the sky. "Briar Cottontail," said he, "if you see anything of Briar Rabbit, you tell him that Briar Fox am hiding behind the big bunch of grass just ahead." Peter stopped short, and his heart gave a great leap. There, behind the clump of grass, was something red sure enough. Peter didn't wait to see any more. He started for a new hiding place he knew of in the Green Forest as fast as he could go, and behind him raced Reddy Fox. As he ran, he heard Blacky the Crow and Sammy Jay laughing, and then he knew that this was the news that they had for him. I guess that Peter Rabbit is a good enough name after all," he panted. End of section 119.
Section 120 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Carmen Stewart, also known as Run Amok Mom. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Road to China. I learned today the world is round, like my big rubber ball, with China on the other side, down there below us all. And so I went and dug a hole. I started in at 8, and dug and dug and dug and dug beside the garden gate. And oh, I thought, what fun 'twill be to get a ladder tall and climb right down to China through the hole behind the wall. What fun to walk through little streets all lit with lanterns queer. Each man will have a pigtail, and how strange the talk I'll hear. To think the road to China lies just by our garden wall. Then Daddy came and said,
"Ho, ho, that's not the way at all. To get to China you must sail 4 days across the sea."
Why, there's no shortcut through the earth, seems very queer to me. And still I sit beside my hole and dream away of that strange far-off country where they've nighttime in our day. End of section 120.
Section 121 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michele Eaton. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Boy Who Wanted the Impossible. By Mary Hayes Davis and Chow Lung. Sing Ching, Pure Gold, was 4 years old when his parents sent him to a baby school for the first time and told him that the teacher could tell him everything he would like to know. When he saw a queer bird flying around, he asked his teacher, "What kind of thing is that in the air?" His teacher told him, "A bird," and that to be a bird meant to fly around and sing in every place and make music for the people. The boy said, "Can I not do it?" His teacher said, "Yes, you can sing music for the people, but you cannot fly unless you get wings." Sing Ching replied, "Yes, I can do that too." Just then the servant girl that his mother had sent came to fetch him home from school. When they reached the park by his home, Sing Ching said, "Lau Mei, I want that long ladder and a long stick." The nurse girl did not know what he would do with them, but she finally had to give both to keep him from crying. She was afraid his mother would hear him cry and that she would come out and scold her for not taking better care of the child. As he took the long ladder, he said, "Now I am going to be a bird." His nurse said, "You cannot be a bird, Sing Ching. Birds fly. You cannot fly. Why are you trying to climb up the ladder? That is not the way to be a bird." Lau Mei helped him up 2 or 3 steps, when his mother called her to come in, and she left him there for a little time. He climbed up, 9 steps by himself, and fell down. But he was not hurt, nor did he cry. He had no fear. He thought of but one thing. He was going to be a bird. Suddenly his mother came and saw him again trying to climb up the ladder and asked, "What are you doing, Sing Ching?" He answered, "I want to be a bird. Wait, I will try again. I know that birds fly in the air, not on the ground. I cannot fly on earth. If I get up high in the air, then I know I can fly." His mother thought he wanted to climb up and get a bird. She looked all around and said, "There is no bird up there now. But, Amma, I want to be a bird." The servant, Lau Mei, came just then and explained to his mother. His mother said he was a foolish boy and gave him food and sent him to school again. In 2 hours the teacher sent all the boys out to play. They ran to the pond where the goldfish were, for they liked to watch them swim in the water. After exercise they all went into the schoolroom, and Sing Ching told his teacher, "I saw many goldfish swimming in the pond. Did you know that, teacher? A man fed them rice and they all came out for him. They seemed so happy. They shook their tails and waved their fins and swam up and down and all around in the cool water. Oh, I should like to be a fish." His teacher said, "Learn lessons now." But Sing Ching could not study. He could only think about the fish. Soon he asked that he might go out to drink. Then he went to the pond and took off his clothes. But the gardener saw him and asked, "What are you doing, boy? This is school time." "I want to be a fish," said Sing Ching. The gardener thought he wanted to catch the fish and said, "The fish are for your eyes and not for your hands. Do not disturb them." Sing Ching sat down and waited until the gardener went away. Then he stepped into the water and talked to the fish. "I am going to be one of you now," he said. "Come to me and show me how to swim with you." But they all hurried away. For half an hour he splashed in the shallow water trying to swim, until the teacher thought, "Where is Sing Ching?" and sent a boy to see. He found him in the pond and asked him to come into the schoolroom, saying the teacher would punish him if he did not. "No," said Sing Ching, "I shall be a fish. I told the teacher I was going to be a fish." And so the boy went back and told the teacher, who hardly knew what to think. Finally he went out with a stick and asked, "Sing Ching, what are you doing here? Do you know this is school time? Do you know that you are allowed only to go out for a drink and not to stay here and play? You have done wrong." "Why, teacher? I told you that I wanted to be a fish," said Sing Ching. "I do not want books or exercises. I'm going to be a fish, and I will not go to school. Mother said you teach everything. Now teach me to be a fish." His teacher said, "How foolish you are, Sing Ching. You are a boy, a man. You can learn many things better than to be a fish. Come with me now." That night when Sing Ching was walking with his mother and nurse out by the water, he saw the summer moon shining in the lake. "How strange, Amma. The moon is under the lake. See, it raises the lake and shakes it all the time. I want it. What kind of a white ball is it?" Then his mother told him that the moon was in the sky, not in the lake, and she explained and showed him. And when he saw the moon in the sky, he said, "I know that it is not the moon in the lake, for it shakes. It is not quite like the one in the sky. It is a silver ball, I know." He asked so many questions that his mother grew tired of answering and let him ask unnoticed. Then he wandered away a little distance and threw stones in the water, and the waters waved and the white ball danced so prettily that he wanted it very much. He waded into the lake deeper, deeper, until he fell down. He screamed and swallowed the water, and it took a long time to make him alive again, after his mother took him out of the lake. When the neighbours heard about it, they said, "Foolish boy, not satisfied to do the things he can, he is always wanting things he cannot have." Many people in this world are like Sing Ching. End of section 121.
Section 122 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Chinese Nursery Rhymes. Old Mr. Chang. Old Mr. Chang, I've oft heard it said, you wear a basket upon your head. You've 2 pair of scissors to cut your meat, and 2 pair of chopsticks with which you eat. Ladybug. Ladybug, ladybug, fly away, do. Fly to the mountain and feed upon dew. feed upon dew, and sleep on a rug, and then run away like a good little bug. The rice cellar. Someone is knocking loud at the door. The dog is making a great uproar. Now I inquire, who can it be? 'Tis only a donkey man I see, calling out at the top of his voice, "Here's the place to get your rice, coarse rice or fine, just to your mind, rice in the husk or cleaned by the wind." End of section 122.
Section 123 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeannie Hall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. A Happy Day in the City by Olive Beaupre Miller. Ned and his mother stood on the corner by the florist shop waiting for the trolley car. Soon it came jangling up the track. Ned waved his hand to the motorman, and the big wheels squealed like a dozen little pigs as the car slowed down and stopped. Ned had the money for their fare held tight in his hand. He always gave it to the conductor himself. He and Mother stepped aboard, and as the car started up with a jerk, they stumbled inside and made their way unsteadily to the only seat that was not already filled. Oh, but Ned was happy. He loved to go downtown on the trolley car. He loved the bumping and the jiggling and all the wonderful sights. Today he was especially happy because he was going to meet his cousin Ruth and her mother, who lived in the country, and they were to have a long, beautiful day together in the city. He did not know what they were going to do to have a jolly time. Mother had kept that a secret, but he had seen Father slip out of the front door very quickly and mysteriously that morning, as if he were carrying something, and he guessed, but then never mind what he guessed. It was all a secret. As Ned looked out of the window, he saw a long row of stores with the gaily decorated front of a moving picture theater among them. And then they whizzed past a row of tall apartment buildings, 3 and 4 stories high, where people made their homes all on a floor, one family above another. It was on the top floor of just such a building that Ned and his father and mother lived. Apartment houses, and then stores, and then more apartment houses, and more stores. That was what he saw all the way downtown. "When I grow up," cried Ned, as their motorman clanged his bell loudly, "I'm going to be a motorman." "Oh," said his mother, "I thought you said yesterday you wanted to be a hurdy-gurdy man and have a street piano and a monkey." "Nope," announced Ned positively. "I'm going to be a motorman, and then you'll see how I'll bang my foot down on the bell and make a big noise, clang, 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 and all the people will run to get out of the way of my car." So they went on for almost an hour, sometimes whizzing, sometimes jogging, sometimes crawling in a crowd behind some slow-moving delivery wagon that could not get off the tracks. At last, they crossed the river and reached the marketplace of the city, where all the fruit and vegetables came in. There, the delivery wagons, with their backs to the sidewalk, were crowded so close together that the horses stood straight out into the street, their noses up to the very trolley tracks. "Oh, Mother, we almost nipped that horse's nose," squealed Ned as they passed. Shortly after that, Mother pressed a button beside their seat to let the conductor know they wanted to get off. The car stopped, and they stepped down on a crowded crossing among automobiles and wagons, right under the tall iron framework where an elevated train was rushing by with a roaring, rumbling noise overhead. All the buildings they passed as they walked along downtown seemed turned a soft pearly gray by the city smoke. Everything was gray except the bright-colored signboards that stood out strikingly, and the gay red, yellow, and purple in a fruit stall here and there. Mother would not let Ned linger today to look at anything, for they must surely be on time to meet Ruth. Inside the great station, they crossed the clean, marble-paved floor and went up the broad stairs to the place where the trains came in. A great iron fence shut off the tracks from the rest of the station, but a guard in blue uniform was already opening the gate to the platform where Ruth's train was pulling in, and a number of people were crowding about to meet friends whom they were expecting. "Oh, I see her, piped Ned. "And there's Aunt Frances, too." Sure enough, there they were, coming along in the midst of the crowd. Soon everybody was kissing everybody else, and Ruth was telling Ned about her new kittens and the garden she had made, and how she could read in her primer, all at once. Mother and Aunt Frances started on ahead, talking, with the children following behind them. "Where are we going today?" asked Ruth. "Oh, that's going to be a surprise. You mustn't ask," said Ned. "But I want to know," insisted Ruth, who never could wait for surprises. "Well, this morning I saw Father slip out the front door, and I'm almost sure he was carrying—" But there Ned stopped, smiled mysteriously, and would not say another word. Mother and Aunt Frances went down a long flight of stairs and out of doors to a place where they all climbed up into a queer old-fashioned bus that was drawn by horses and ran from the station to the great stores. When the bus was filled with people, the driver climbed up into his seat in front, cried, "Get up!" to the horses, and they started off. But they had gone jiggling and joggling only a short distance over the cobblestone pavement when they heard the great noise of an alarm bell ringing, and the bus stopped. Ruth and Ned turned around and looked excitedly out of the window. They had just come to the bridge over the river, and as the bell kept on ringing, people were hurrying and scurrying to get across. No sooner was the bridge empty than a chain was stretched over the approach to it, and a big policeman took his place there to prevent anyone else from stepping on it. Then the huge structure parted in the middle, and the two sides were raised straight up in the air by machinery from a little house on shore. Next, a great steamer with tall funnels, too tall to have passed under the bridge when it was down, was pulled by a little puffing, smoking tug slowly past the crossing, and the little tug whistled shrilly for the next bridge up the river to open out of its way. "Oh, Ned," cried Ruth, as she watched all this with breathless interest. "I wonder how it would be if anybody would just hang on to the bridge and swing right up with it into the air." "Well," laughed Mother, "unless anybody was a fly, I think anybody would not hang on very long." "Splash! He'd go into the water," said Ned, "and we'd have to fish him out." When the bridge was down again, the bus went jiggling and joggling on, till it came to a great store where everybody got out. The store took up a whole block and was at least 15 stories high. All about were buildings so tall that, as they lifted their uneven outlines against the sky, the street seemed but a narrow slit between them. The bigness of it all made Ruth feel small and lonely, so she came nearer to Ned and took fast hold of his hand. But that wasn't the way the big buildings made Ned feel at all. "When I get big," he cried, "I'm going to be a builder and build way, way, way up till I can touch the sky." As he looked up to think how very high he was going to build, he stubbed his toe and fell flat on the sidewalk, pulling Ruth halfway down with him. "My dear little boy," laughed his mother, as she helped him up and brushed him off. "Before you can build to the sky, you will have to learn to look where you take your next step." Inside the building there were many people, but the store was so large it did not seem crowded. There were any number of counters about, covered with lace and ribbons and gloves and handkerchiefs and many other things, and in one place there was an opening in the ceiling 4 or 5 stories high. Way, way up, so far it almost took your breath away to look, the roof of the great opening was a dome all made of tiny bits of colored glass that shone like jewels. "Just like the castles in fairyland," said Ruth. They passed under a great archway draped with American flags, and then Mother and Aunt Frances stopped at the button counter. Ned was stooping down looking in the lower part of the glass showcase and thinking what fine wheels for his train some of the big buttons would make, when all of a sudden Ruth disappeared. They all three turned around toward the aisle at the same time, but she was nowhere to be seen. Aunt Frances called her, but she did not answer. Not one of the saleswomen or the floor walker had noticed where she went. So Mother, Ned, and Aunt Frances hunted and hunted, and at last they found her a long way off, looking longingly at a pile of little girls' parasols, and half covered up by a pink one that she had opened over her head. "Why, Ruth Maxwell Martin," said her mother, "we've been hunting 15 minutes for you. You're a big enough little girl to know you must not wander away." Ruth hung her head and looked foolish, for she was indeed big enough to know. But after Aunt Frances had made her understand how much trouble she had given them all, Mother bought her the little pink parasol to have for her own. Then Aunt Frances said, "Most of our shopping isn't very interesting to the children. Let us leave them for an hour in the playroom." So they all crossed over to a row of elevators, got into one with a great crowd of other people, and went up to the 4th floor. Then they passed through the beautiful toy section and saw all the dolls, and the dolls' houses, and dolls' furniture, and dolls' clothes, and toy animals, and toy villages, and toy automobiles, and toy aeroplanes, and toy trains that would really run by electricity, and toy stoves that would really cook by electricity, and oh, such a number of other things that Ruth sighed with delight. "I wish I could live in a place like this." "Well, you can live here for an hour," laughed her mother as they went on into the playroom. A great number of children were there, laughing and chattering, playing in sandboxes, sliding down wooden slides, rocking back and forth on great horses as big as life, riding on little merry-go-rounds, or swinging in the swings. Ned and Ruth had time to try everything that was fun in the whole place before their mothers came back again. When they all started out once more, the hands of the big clock above the elevators pointed to 12 o'clock. So they went into the nice, clean marble washroom and got ready for lunch. Then they went up to the restaurant. The room where they found themselves was one of 5 or 6 lunchrooms that covered the whole 7th floor of the building. It was very gaily painted and had a number of little tables about. In the center of the room was a beautiful fountain with a statue in the middle and goldfish swimming in it. Ned and Ruth could hardly bear to leave the little darting goldfish, even to order lunch. But when Aunt Frances called them, they went and sat down at a table with a white cloth on it, and a candlestick with a pretty pink shade in the center. Then a neat young woman in black, with a white apron, came and brought them each a card that had a list of all the good things they might have to eat. Mother and Aunt Frances told the waitress what to bring, so she went off and came back soon with her big tray loaded. There was some orange and banana salad and a pretty nest of lettuce for each of them. There were some buns covered with sugar and currants, and 4 little bottles of milk. For dessert, they each had chocolate ice cream. It was then that Ruth said, "Oh, I'm having such a happy time, but I do wish I knew where we are going this afternoon." "Well," said Mother, "suppose we all go home and take a nap." "Oh, no, no, no!" shrieked both children. But that was all Mother would say. After lunch, they left the big store and came out on the crowded street. Such a number of people as there were, all busily hurrying somewhere. There wasn't any lingering here. Everybody had something to do and was keeping right about his business of getting there to do it. In the street there seemed a tangled mass of automobiles and wagons and trolley cars. But there were 2 policemen on the corner, and when Ruth and Ned reached there, they could see that what had seemed such a tangled mass was very orderly after all. When the policeman whistled once and held up his hand, all the automobiles and wagons and trolley cars went in one direction, while the others waited. And when he blew his whistle twice, they all went in the other direction, so they never interfered with each other. "When I grow up, I'm surely going to be a big policeman," said Ned. "Then you'll hold up your hand and make all the wagons wait while I cross the street, won't you?" said Ruth. Soon they came to the wide boulevard, where were all the finest small shops in the city. On the farther side of the street was a pretty strip of green park with shrubbery, flowers, and statues that stretched all the way up the avenue, and beyond that strip sparkled the blue waters of the lake. But Ned, Ruth, Mother, and Aunt Frances were chiefly interested in the windows of the shops on their own side of the street as they walked along. Ned stopped in front of the electrical shop, where were washing machines and fans and all sorts of things running by electricity. Ruth lingered by the big waxen figures of beautiful ladies like great wax dolls, dressed in such beautiful clothes they made the little girl think of the princesses in her fairy tales. Mother and Aunt Frances looked in at the linen and jewelry, and they all stopped together to peep at the candy and the flowers. "I know where we're going," whispered Ned to Ruth. "To Father's office." Sure enough, they went into a large office building, rode up in the elevator, and walked down a long hall into Father's office. There was Father working busily at his desk. "Well, hello," he cried as he whirled around in his chair, kissed Ruth, put his arm around Ned, shook hands with Aunt Frances, and smiled at Mother. "Oh, Uncle," cried Ruth, "please tell me, where are we going this afternoon?" But Father wouldn't tell either. He just smiled, got up, and left the room. While they were waiting for him to come back, the children went over to the window and looked out. They were up very high, and the people and automobiles in the street below looked very small. Nearby, on the other side of the street, was a great stone building with 2 fine bronze lions on either side of the broad steps guarding the entrance. In the carved border about the top, where Ruth and Ned could see them clearly, a number of pigeons roosted, while others flew circling about in the air or dropped down into the park below to bathe and play in the waters of the fountain. Farther on, beyond the green stretch of parkway, they could just see the tops of trains on a track down below the level of the ground. From the engines rose little cottony white and gray curls of smoke that floated away and melted into the soft haze hanging over the lake beyond. Sometimes the sunlight pierced the haze and flashed back brightly from the water, from the white sail of a boat or the wing of a great white bird. It was all very soft and bright and lovely. In a few moments, back came Father, and there, as he stood in the doorway, the children saw he had the big picnic basket over his arm. "Oh, we're going to have a picnic. That's what we're going to do. I thought so," piped Ned. "Where are we going?" "How would Lincoln Park do?" asked Father. "I've brought the basket down this morning, and it's been in Mr. Smith's icebox ever since." "Oh, goody, goody!" cried the children. They waited on the corner for the motor bus. The bus ran just like an automobile, and beside the inside seats, it had seats up on its roof. Ned and Father let the ladies go up first, so the bus had started before they and the picnic basket got to the top, and it was the queerest, wobbliest feeling to stagger up, clutching hold of the rail and tumble into a seat. Up there one could see everything. The bus made a loop around the main streets downtown, then it started out toward the park. Soon it was running along the smooth black pavement of a wide boulevard, past beautiful homes and under fine old trees. Oh, but it was jolly to be right up in the treetops. At last they came into the fresh green park and past a little harbor, where a number of pretty launches were anchored. They went over a stone bridge, past beds of beautiful flowers, by a marble bandstand, and beneath a great towering statue of General Grant on horseback. Then they all got off at a pretty knoll with a fine view over the lake. There, in the shade of a tree, Mother and Aunt Frances sat on a bench to rest. Father, after he put down the lunch basket, started with the 2 children to see the animals and birds. In the birdhouse there was such a screeching they could hardly hear themselves think, and in the cages round about there was every kind of gay or sober-colored bird from all the corners of the world. In the center of the room was a pond filled with water birds. Some of these were very long-legged, some were very short-legged, and some were very queer indeed, especially one important old white pelican who strutted about and seemed to think he owned the pond. "When you grow up, Ned, how would you like to be a pelican?" asked Father with a twinkle in his eye. But just at that moment Ruth covered her ears with her hands and said, "Oh, it's too noisy in here. Let's go on." So they walked on past the zebras, the llamas, the deer, the camels, and the buffaloes. Then they came back over some steps and by the pits of the bears, the foxes, and wolves. They saw the giraffes eating hay out of a high trough, and the elephant swinging his trunk and flapping his ears beneath a canvas canopy. They spent a long time laughing at the ridiculous antics of the monkeys, and last of all, they visited the great house where the lions, tigers, and leopards are kept. "I'd like to see a real wild tiger prowling around in the jungle," said Ned as they were returning. "That's what I should." "Oh dear, I shouldn't," said Ruth. "What would you do, Ned, if you did see one?" "I think," answered Father very solemnly, "that Ned would run after the lion like a brave man and sprinkle salt on his tail." By the time they got back to Mother and Aunt Frances, they were ready to sit down on the soft grass beneath the tree and rest. But even here there was plenty of interest to watch. Nearby, a party of children were having a picnic, laughing and playing pretty games, while strings of Japanese lanterns had been strung up around them through the trees. On the sandy beach of the lake, a number of other children were wading or bathing, and every now and then, farther out beyond them, a boat of some kind passed. It was all so pleasant the time seemed to fly on wings. Before they knew it, supper was all spread out on the grass. It was growing dusk, and the little Japanese lanterns were lit and twinkling among the trees when Aunt Frances said, "Now, girlie, we must start for home, or you'll never be able to keep your eyes open till we get on the train." So Ned and Ruth kissed each other goodbye. Father hailed the southbound bus and helped Ruth and Aunt Frances aboard. Then, as they rode away, Ned and Ruth waved their hands to each other and cried, "Goodbye, goodbye. We'll have another happy day like this next year." End of section 123. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Section 124 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Verity, Kendall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. City Smoke by Olive Beaupre Miller. From tall black chimneys leaps the smoke, climbs high the drifting ladder of the wind, leaves far behind the chasing flames that mount the sky to catch it, laughs out its joy in soft white puffs, then slowly fades to pearl and purple, and settling to the earth, outspreads o'er the city in brooding dove-grey wings. End of section 124. Recording by Verity, Kendall. Section 125 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Verity, Kendall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Night and Day by Mary Mapes Dodge. When I run about all day, when I kneel at night and pray, God sees. When I'm dreaming in the dark, when I lie awake and hark, God sees. Need I ever know a fear, night and day my Father's near, God sees. End of section 125. Recording by Verity, Kendall.
Section 126 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Janet Morris. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Babe Moses. There was a king over Egypt who knew nothing of God. Therefore he thought no good in his heart. And he said, There live in the midst of our land the children of Israel. They are not of our people, yet they are more in numbers than we. I fear lest they have too many babes that grow up to be strong men and stand against us. Come on, then, let us throw into the river every boy babe that is born unto them. Now there was at this time in Egypt a certain man and his wife of the children of Israel, and there was born unto them a boy babe, even such a one as Pharaoh the king had commanded should be thrown into the river. But he was a goodly child, and his mother loved him, and held him close to her heart, and cherished him, and she kept him hid 3 months, that Pharaoh's servants might not find him and throw him into the river. And when she could no longer hide him, she gathered bulrushes from the river bank, and made of them a little ark. And she daubed the ark with mud and pitch, and put her babe therein, and laid him in the rushes by the river. Then she bade his sister stand afar off, and watch what would be done to him. And she kissed the little one, and went back to her home, for her trust was in God, and she knew that God was with the child to save him. And it came to pass that the daughter of Pharaoh the king came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. When she saw the ark among the rushes, she sent her maid to get it, and when she had laid back the coverings, she saw the little babe, and behold, he was crying. Then Pharaoh's daughter was filled with pity for the child, and she took him to her and said, "This is a babe of the children of Israel. Even such a one as my father has commanded should be thrown into the river." But as she held the little one in her arms and saw how he wept, God touched her heart, and she thought within herself to save the child. For she knew that the king, her father, would grant unto her whatsoever she asked of him. So she cried out to her maids and said, "I will ask of the king my father, that I may keep this little one. He shall be as my own son." Then came the sister of the babe, who had been watching, and said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the women of Israel, that she may care for the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went, and called the child's own mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto the child's mother, "Take this child away, and nurse him for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the mother took her little babe, and held him close, and rejoiced, and gave thanks in her heart that God had saved him. And she nursed the child, and he grew, and when he was no more a babe, she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter in the house of the king, and Pharaoh's daughter kept him as her own son. And she called his name Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." End of section 126. Recording by Janet Morris.
Section 127 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rahimus Holmes. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Psalm 100. A psalm of praise. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. End of section 127. Recording by Rahimus Holmes.
Section 128 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Verity, Kendall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Little Blue Apron. Little Blue Apron, how do you do? Never a stocking and never a shoe. Little Blue Apron, she answered me, You don't wear stockings and shoes by the sea. Little Blue Apron, never a hat! How do you manage to go out like that? Why, what is the use of a hat? Said she. You never wear hats when you're by the sea. Why, Little Blue Apron, it seems to me very delightful to live by the sea, but what would hatters and shoemakers do if everyone lived by the sea like you? End of section 128. Recording by Verity Kendall.
Section 129 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeannie Hall. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Doll Under the Briar Rose Bush by Jørgen Moe. Translated from the Norwegian by Gudrun Thorne Thompson. There was once a little girl, and her name was Beate. She was only 5 years old, but a bright and good little girl she was. On her birthday, her father had given her a beautiful straw hat. There were red ribbons around it. I can't tell you how pretty it was. Her mother had given her a pair of yellow shoes and the daintiest white dress. But her old aunt had given her the very best present of all. It was a doll with a sweet, pretty face and dark brown curls. She was a perfect beauty in every respect. There was nothing the matter with her except that the left eyebrow was painted a tiny bit too high up. It looks as if she were frowning a little. I wonder if she is not quite pleased, asked Beate when she held her in her arms. Oh, yes, answered her aunt, but she doesn't know you yet. It is a habit she has of always lifting her eyebrow a little when she looks closely at anyone. She only wants to find out if you are a good little girl. Yes, yes, and now she knows, for now that eyebrow is just like the other one, said Beate. Oh, how Beate grew to love that doll, almost more than she loved Marie and Louise, and they were her best friends. One day, Beate was walking in the yard with her doll in her arms. The doll had a new name now, and they had become fast friends. She had called her Beate, her own name, and the name of her old aunt, who had given her the doll. It was early in the spring. There was a beautiful green spot with fine, soft grass in one corner of the yard around the old well. There stood a big willow tree with a low trunk, and it was covered with the little yellow blossoms that children call goslings. They looked like goslings, too, for each little tassel was soft, soft yellow down. And they can swim in the water, but walk? No, that they cannot do. Now Big Beate, she wasn't more than 5 years old, but she was ever so much bigger than the other one. And little Beate soon agreed that they would pick goslings from the tree and throw them into the well, so that they might have just as good a time as the goslings that were swimming about in the pond. It was really Big Beate who thought of this first, but little Beate agreed immediately. You can't imagine how good she always was. Now Big Beate climbed up into the willow and picked many pretty yellow goslings into her white apron. And when she counted them and had counted to 20 twice, she said that now they had enough, and little Beate thought so too. So she began to climb down, but that was not easy, for she had to hold her apron together with one hand and climb with the other. She thought little Beate called up to her to throw the goslings down first, but she didn't dare to do that. She was afraid they might fall and hurt themselves. Now both of them ran over to the well, and Big Beate helped her little friend to get her legs firmly fixed between the logs that were around the well, so that they might sit in comfort and watch the little goslings swim about on the water. Then gosling after gosling was dropped down, and as soon as each one reached the water, it seemed to become alive, and it moved about. Oh, what fun! Big Beate clapped her hands to the pretty little downy birds, and when she helped little Beate a bit, she too could clap her hands. But after a while, the little goslings would not swim any longer, but lay quite still. That was no fun at all. So Big Beate asked her namesake if she didn't think she might lean a little over the edge of the well and blow on them, for then she thought they might come to life again. Little Beate didn't answer, but she raised her left eyebrow a good deal and moved her right arm in the air as if she were saying, "Please don't do that, dear Big Beate. Don't you remember Mother has told us how dark it is down there in the well? Think if you should fall in." "Oh, nonsense. Just see how easy it is," said Big Beate, for she thought the goslings were stupid when they didn't want to swim about. She leaned out over the well and blew on the nearest ones. Yes, it helped. The goslings began to swim again, but those that were farthest away didn't move at all. "What stupid little things," said Beate, and she leaned far, far out over the edge of the well. Then her little hand slipped on the smooth log, and splash! In she fell, deep down in the water. It was so cold, so icy cold, and it closed over her head and took the straw hat, which she had got on her birthday, off her hair. She hadn't time to hear if little Beate screamed, but I'm sure she did. When Beate's head came over the water again, she grasped the round log with both her hands. But the hands were too small, and the log so wide and slippery she couldn't hold on. Then she saw her dear friend, little Beate, standing stiff and staring at her with her right arm stretched out to her. Big Beate hurriedly caught hold of her, and little Beate made herself as stiff as she could, and stiffer still, and stood there between the logs holding her dear friend out of the water. Now Beate screamed so loudly that her father and mother heard her and came running as fast as they could and pulled her out. She was dripping wet and so cold that her teeth chattered. The father ran to the house with her, but she begged him for heaven's sake not to leave little Beate, for she might fall into the well, and it's she who has saved me. Now they put Beate to bed, and little Beate had to sleep with her. When she had said her prayers, she hugged her little friend and said, "Never, never can I thank you enough, because you saved me from that deep well, dear little Beate. Of course, I know that our Lord helped you to stand firm between the logs, and to make yourself so strong and stiff, but it was you, and no one else, who stretched your hand out to me." End of section 129. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Section 130 of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Federica. In the Nursery of My Bookhouse. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Elf and the Dormouse by Oliver Herford. Under a toadstool crept a wee elf, out of the rain, to shelter himself. Under the toadstool, sound asleep, sat a big dormouse, all in a heap. Trembled the wee elf, frightened, and yet fearing to fly away lest he get wet. To the next shelter, maybe a mile. Sudden the wee elf smiled a wee smile, tugged till the toadstool toppled in two. Holding it over him, gaily he flew. Soon he was safe home, dry as could be. Soon woke the dormouse. "Good gracious me, where is my toadstool?" loud he lamented. And that's how umbrellas first were invented. End of section 130. Recording by Federica. End of In the Nursery of My Bookhouse by Olive Beaupre Miller.